All right, welcome to the measurement and evaluation section for this morning. This is the second day of GSTC. So my name is Jason Lin. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hotelzero. So we're a software company based in the United States, providing analytic and GSTC certification data management software. So today, this is actually my second time moderating this measurement evaluation panel. I did one last year in Singapore, so it's an exciting one. I think that's why we have the audience today, and we have great speakers of experts today. So a lot of time when I think about analytic and measurement, because I came from more like a Silicon Valley startup type of background, so build, measure, learn process is what we preach in the technology world. So it's a very much a process like data collection, data analysis, implementation, and of course, optimize, right? But in the current context of sustainability in tourism, a lot of the data collection are down in operation, on the ground, offline. So that's why there's a lot of challenges. And today, we're very privileged to have a panel of experts to share their insights and best practices on analytic system, framework, methodology, indicators, and tools to make analytical journey very useful, beautiful, and impactful. So we'll dive into some very practical and technical aspect of measurement and evaluation today. So to kick off today's session, we'll be moving through a presentation sequence from the global landscape of global sustainable tourism research to the national and destination level, and finally down to a real-world application at the hotel level. So I'm going to give a brief intro of each speakers. First, we'll have Dr. Susana Becken. She is a professor of sustainable tourism at Griffith University in Australia and an independent advisory group member at Travelers. Susana is widely published thought leaders on climate, energy, and tourism systems. Her current work with the OECD on destination monitoring and sustainability indicators closely align with the growing need of harmonized measurement framework across destinations. And also joining us from the Destination Canada is Christopher Hancock, Senior Director of Global Procurement and Environmental Programs. Chris brings a strategic lens to environmental management, combining supply chain leadership, market intelligence, and performance accountability to drive systematic change within Canada's National Tourism Organization. Next, from Costa Rica, we're thrilled to have welcome Susana Vicente Álamo, ESG Director at Peninsula, Papagayo. She leads a comprehensive sustainability program spanning environmental conservation, pollution reduction, community engagement, and biodiversity restoration, including one of the largest coral reef restoration projects in the country. And finally, representing Rosewood Hotel Group, we have Jessica Cheung, Manager of Global Impact and Sustainability Analytics. Jessica plays a pivotal role in aggregating, analyzing, and amplifying sustainability efforts across 50-plus properties worldwide, with a background in corporate responsibility, stakeholder engagement, and building data-driven impact programs. And lastly, after this session, GSTC wanted me to remind you guys, during the coffee break, we have a partnership video showing with CWP, so please enjoy that. All right, so without further ado, let's invite our first speaker, Dr. Susana Becken, on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you all here for this absolutely amazing session. I thought, okay, 9 o'clock in the morning talking about monitoring, but it's really good. And I know lots of you in the audience are really a lot involved with evaluation and measurement. And so I do want to talk a little bit about data today, because data is the building block for all of these activities. And in fact, I mean, it's hardly new for me to say that we live in the age of data. In fact, for the last 10 10 years when I go to conferences, I hear things like, oh, data is the new oil, data is power. And of course, we're now seeing the AI revolution in front of, like we're living it. And I don't know if we really understand it yet, but of course, data drives everything. And in fact, there's so much that it's sometimes a little bit overwhelming. We don't know where all these digital footprints that we create go. And so what I want to argue today is that for sustainable tourism, we need data. But we need data that really have a purpose, that we understand, and that we can tell the story to make a difference. And so I've got one slide here, which will accompany me for my sort of 8 minutes. And I want to give some examples from the work I've been doing around 3 areas where data are crucial for sustainable tourism. One is evaluation, and that's really understanding, is what we're doing working? Is whatever intervention or policy we're putting in place, is it making a difference? The second block is around monitoring. This is putting in place systems that help us to track performance. Maybe we have alert systems. And then the last one is, in some ways, is the most important one. Well, they're all connected, but the last one is also to use data for planning, okay, for making good decisions, forward thinking. Now, data are just numbers, or if you're doing qualitative research, so I'm doing both, there may be sentences, statements, but for data to become useful, we need to connect them, we need to interpret them, we need to create context. And so I'll give you a few examples, starting with evaluation. Now, a few years ago, I worked with EarthCheck, and we analyzed data on energy use and water. And to basically, the question was, when hotels join a certification program, does this improve their performance? So we looked, some had been in it for 7 years, 10 years, and we did find indeed annual improvements of a few percent, reductions in energy use, but the biggest hit came in the first year after joining. Not surprising, I can see people nodding. It's when people are motivated, it's a low-hanging fruit, you change some light bulbs, etc. And then sort of it trickled down. So what we learned from that was to really explicitly connect sustainability action with refurbishment cycles. Because sort of every 5 to 7 years, hotels invest in new maybe air conditioning systems, staff training. So really connect that data to then reignite another cycle of improvements. In another project, we used smart metering in hotel rooms. So every single hotel room was smart metered for energy and water. And we tried to test different messages for the guests to change their behavior. And people do. So we had different signage. We had tablets in the room where people could really look at their real-time energy consumption compared to other guests, which so triggers a bit of competitive spirit with some. And so we found reductions up to 20%. Now, what really made a difference for the owner of the property was when we converted that into dollar savings. And you could say, oh, that's a bit of a shame. Carbon wouldn't have been important enough. But now, of course, this was after COVID, and businesses were doing it tough. And some of these hotels were saving up to $10,000 a year. And all of a sudden was like, wow, why didn't we do this earlier? So really important, not just to throw kilowatt hours at people, but actually what does it mean for your business? Now, the second area, in terms of monitoring, I just want to talk a little bit about you mentioned the OECD project I'm working on in Europe with 5 countries on sustainable tourism indicators. And we've talked a lot yesterday already, measurement of destinations. And so what we did in those 5 countries was to really work with the government and other stakeholders and find out what are the key issues that concern you about tourism. Or maybe where do you have opportunities, positive framing. And so, for example, Malta, a little island in the Mediterranean, beautiful. One key issue is water. So every additional visitor that comes, effectively you need to ramp up the desalination plant and make more water. The electricity for that comes also from somewhere else by imported oil. So it's actually quite a cost. So water was one thing, seasonality was another one, and of course the protection of the heritage. So then once we realized, okay, these are the real issues, we developed indicators, some measures that we need to monitor. And I say that because I've been in situations where working with destinations, saying, okay, community sentiment, really important issue. For example, Balearic Islands, very famous Barcelona in Europe. Oh, let's measure it. Let's do a survey of the residents. And I said, well, and so what are you going to do when the sentiment tips? So when you monitor, when you collect data, what is the system in place to actually respond to it? So is it connected to the policy processes, and who is in charge and who can actually do something about it? So that's really important. Same with carbon footprint monitoring. Every destination wants to measure their carbon footprint. And what are you going to do about it? Same for businesses. What are you going to do when you find it's increasing? Because you've got your growth target, so carbon will go up. So really important to connect the monitoring with the decision making. Now the last one is around planning, and I want to use two examples here. One with Travelist, so I'm on the advisory group, and many of you, when you look on Google, for example, for flights or Skyscanner, Expedia, you now see there's a carbon number alongside price. And so that all goes to the Travelist Google TIM, Travel Impact Model. So the good news is everyone on these platforms uses the same methodology. So it doesn't matter which of these search engines you use, you always get the same CO2, which is really important for the trust in the data. Now, 600 billion or so searchers have been exposed to seeing their CO2. Now the question is, who's changing their behavior? So this is the next step in this journey. So first was to create the data. Second one is that these platforms are testing how can we make it more meaningful to whether it's a corporate agent or an individual traveler. So some are testing, if you choose this flight, which is better than the average, it's like X cars off the road, or it's like X trees planted sequestering carbon. So you need to contextualize it, and ultimately, and so this is why I created a bit of a circle here on my figure. When you do things like measurement or you use data for decision making, you need to evaluate as well. So these 600 billion flight searches that saw their carbon footprint, how much change, how much impact has that had? So that's the next question, and Travelist are working on that. So I'm looking forward to the results. If people really choose greener flights, which, by the way, it's an oxymoron. There's no green flight, but it's a different story. The last one, in terms of really foresight scenario planning, I want to talk briefly about a project in Queenstown, and shout out to the colleagues here from Queenstown in New Zealand, where really with foresight, the destination is looking at having an evidence-based sort of model to understand the tourism sector, tourism activity as part of the destination. And so we combined quite different types of data, like expenditure, jobs created, carbon emissions, electricity, and so on, to then understand which types of visitors, during what times of the year, because pressure on local resources is different in the peak season from the off-season. And so if we change demand, how will that impact the destination? And how will that flow on through other parts of the destination that are really important? So that's where you use data for planning and future decision making. So I think time is up. Let me close with just the two basically key messages that I did want to convey today. One is, well, data is important, but data with a purpose. And we need data that tell a story. Otherwise, we do not see the change that we need to see for sustainable tourism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susana. Sorry, I forgot to mention there's a slide due. So everybody knows how to use slide due by now, right? Second day. So please post your question to the panelist. So we'll be taking your question later. Thank you. All right. Quiz? Yeah, next. Thank you.
Bula, bonjour, and good morning, everybody. It's truly an honor to be here in Fiji, a place that reminds us every day of what we are working to protect. Vibrant cultures, strong communities, and stunning natural beauty. Now, I know the phrase sustainability and reporting doesn't exactly get people to jump out of their seats at 9 a.m. On a conference, and we really hope to change that today. So in the next few minutes, I want to share with you how Destination Canada is reimagining what we measure, why it matters, and how it's helping us build a future where tourism genuinely contributes to the wealth and well-being of people, places, and the planet. First, just some quick numbers about Canada and tourism within it. Tourism is a vital part of Canada's economy, supporting jobs, generating revenue. And because it matters so much economically, socially, and culturally, we have a responsibility to make sure that it's also contributing to a more sustainable and resilient future. Tourism in Canada generates approximately $130 billion a year in revenue. 1 in 10 jobs in Canada are directly related to tourism, and it fuels over 5,000 communities in Canada. So this is something that is vitally important to Canada and is something that we really take serious when we are talking about our sustainability efforts. So when you look at Canada and Fiji, people see us as being polar opposites on the other side of the world. Although we may look very different on paper, like we have here, in fact, one of us can fit in the other 546 times. You see the small Fiji there in the middle of Canada. But what is striking to me is the similarities between Canada and Fiji. Both of our countries are home to deep cultural traditions, rich natural beauty, and most importantly, warm, welcoming people who understand the power of tourism to connect, heal, and grow. And it's that shared spirit that brings us together in conversations like this, working to protect what matters most. Sustainability isn't just a side project for Destination Canada. It is something that is central to our long-term vision. That's why we joined the GSTC, and that is also why we became signatories of the Glasgow Declaration and the Government of Canada's Net Zero Challenge. These commitments help guide our actions, but they also reflect our belief that Canada has a role to play, a leadership, not just as a participant, but as a leader in sustainable tourism on the global stage. Now, I'll quickly talk about what we measure internally at Destination Canada with data and analytics. As part of our corporate commitment to sustainability, we track things like our carbon footprint with scopes 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We capture everything from our purchased and capital assets, our buildings and facilities that we have around the world, everything down to our employee commuting, how our employees get to work and back, the organization run events, whether they be trade shows or something else, and as well as our business travel. So we capture all this information, as Suzanne said too, with the hopes of improving and making incremental improvements and driving continuous improvement at DC to lower our carbon footprint. But now what I'm going to do is sort of talk about where things get a little more interesting. This is what you see. I apologize, you may not be able to read it. It's just here for visuals. This is Canada's Wealth and Wellbeing Index. This is something that Canada just released, Destination Canada just released a few months ago, and is one of the most innovative tools we've ever developed. Not just to measure tourism, but to reshape how we define success. It was designed from the ground up to support, educate, and engage the tourism industry, helping us to move beyond basic visitor numbers and spending to understand how tourism truly impacts our communities, our environment, and our shared future. What you see here is our sub-indicators. These are the detailed building blocks that we track. These span everything from our impact to our communities, our environment, as well as aspects about revenue generation and others. They, again, capture everything from housing pressures and employment quality and equity to emissions, cultural vitality, and more. And together they form the foundation of the 6 key categories that I'll share with you next. At the heart of Canada's Wealth and Wellbeing Index are 6 pillars, which we call the 6 E's. They give us a more complete picture of how tourism impacts Canada economically, socially, and environmentally, and they help us to define success in a much more meaningful manner. First, economic. Of course, we track spending, GDP, tourism revenues, inbound flights, number of days in hotels, that sort of thing. But what we also ask is this economic activity distributed fairly? Is it resilient and regenerative? Next is employment. This goes beyond job numbers. We look at job quality, fair wages, career development, diversity, long-term stability in the tourism workforce. As I showed in the beginning of the presentation, 1 in 10 jobs in Canada is directly related to the tourism industry, and this is something we genuinely care about. Next is enablement. This is about capacity building. Do communities have the data, the funding, partnerships, and local government tools they need to guide tourism on their own terms? And then the environmental aspect of it. Certainly, we don't want to leave this out. We track things like carbon emissions, water and energy usage, waste, and biodiversity health, all critical to protecting the natural assets that tourism depends on. Engagement. Tourism works best when it is participatory. We look at how residents, Indigenous partners, and underrepresented voices are included in this decision-making. And then experience. Finally, we look at both visitor and resident experiences when it comes to travel and tourism. Are the people having respectful, memorable, and mutually beneficial encounters through tourism? So these 6 pillars move us away from volume-based metrics and towards something much more powerful, a holistic understanding of tourism's role in well-being. This is an example of how the Wealth and Wellbeing Index is visually represented. This represents one of Canada's provinces, in particular British Columbia. We provide this information free of charge to our provinces and territories in the hopes that they can develop a continuous improvement methodology where they can look at where they stand in relation to their historic self and how they can compare to the other provinces and territories across Canada. So this index is currently available, as I said, on a provincial and territory level. And what it's important, it allows us to track each region's progress over time, comparing them not just to each other, but to their own historical performances. And because each of Canada's provinces and territories are so unique in geography, in culture, in capacity, in tourism dynamics, this approach encourages continuous improvement rather than a one-size-fits-all ranking. So if you would like more information on Canada's new Wealth and Wellbeing Index, there's a link here. Feel free to come speak to me about it. It's accessible to everyone. We hope to roll out additional phases of it, getting down into a more destination or a city level. And I certainly want to thank everybody for their commitment towards sustainability today. I have, sort of in the spirit of sustainability and as is culture in Fiji, to bring gifts to your guests' home. I brought with me today a number of these Canadian-sourced manufactured pens that are made of 100% post-consumer recyclable material and manufactured by marginalized communities such as women-owned and operated businesses and people that are being reintegrated into society, as well as some of our Indigenous communities as well. So please see me at the end. Get your Canada pen, and thank you all very much.
Good morning. Waiting for my slides. But first, thank you, the GSTC, for organizing this event and bringing us to this paradise in Fiji. Good morning again, everyone. Let me ask you something before we start. If your car had no speedometer, no gas gauge, and no GPS, would you drive it across the desert? I guess the answer is no. So welcome to the world of sustainability without measurement. Before we dive into this topic, I wanted to introduce you to our beautiful destination, Peninsula Papagayo, located in the northern Pacific coast of Costa Rica. Peninsula spans 1,400 acres of forest. We have 3 hotels, a Four Seasons, an Andaz, and a Ritz-Carlton Reserve hotels, a marina, a golf course, private residential community, 3 beach clubs, and a sports complex. And if that was not enough, we have 3 different corporations managing these hotels, 2 ownership groups, over 100 private homeowners, and multiple stakeholders. So as you can imagine, measuring and evaluating what we do is nothing but complex. So let's dive in. For us, measuring and evaluating is not just about ticking boxes for annual reports. We, of course, also do annual reports. But for us, measuring should be about making better decisions, prioritizing resources, and, of course, having an impact. But if we measure too little, we're blind. We get lost in the desert. If we measure too much, we are paralyzed. So imagine driving this car, like you get nowhere. So for us, the key is balance. And let me share with you our journey so far. When I first joined Peninsula Papagayo, we had this renowned big-name consulting company telling us to be carbon neutral by 2025. That was back in 2021, and we hadn't even calculated our carbon footprint yet. So I was shocked, like how on earth are we going to make such a big public commitment without any data? I mean, I stopped everything, I went to my boss, I talked to him, and he said, well, you have 12 months to figure out what to do. So we went back to basics. We started collecting data, focusing on what was truly material, and then moving forward. And this is what we did. We started with the what. What are we going to measure? So it was after COVID, we didn't have an updated materiality assessment. So what we did was, okay, let's start with the obvious impact areas in hospitality, which are water, waste, emissions, biodiversity, and also social impact. And this is how we started. Then we moved to the who. We made sure that we assigned clear responsibilities to everyone, and that was also included in our governance structure. So everyone knew who was responsible for which data, when, and how to report it. Then we moved to the how. We formed working committees and we started reporting monthly on Excel files. Then we moved to an online software as a service provider for sustainability data collection. We also hired a consultant, and what is most important, and I think Susana mentioned that, we agreed on methodologies, all these operators, because we wanted to make sure that the data we collected was valid and useful for everyone, and we didn't lose resources and time. Once all that was done, we then updated our materiality assessment. So we wanted to make sure that we were working on what truly impacts our stakeholders, and with all that data in place, we were able to create our strategy, Peninsula Papagayo 2030. Once that system was in place, we focused on using measurement to drive action and impact, and the results speak for themselves. So in these 5 categories on examples, on environmental footprint, all the data collected and the measurement led to saving water, emissions, and also money. For example, we eliminated 1 million plastic bottles. We reduced carbon footprint by 19%, for example. On food waste, our artificial intelligence-powered smart scale cut waste by 50% in a year at the Four Seasons Hotel. And the system paid for itself in just 3 months, which is amazing. On energy, our energy efficiency certification saved us in a year $600,000 on electricity bill, which is a lot. And as you said, we were like, why didn't we do that before? And we reduced our electricity consumption by 16%. On social impact, we measured the multi-poverty index survey, which is a Harvard methodology to understand the socioeconomic circumstances of our employees, and that led to English lessons for the back of the house staff, mental health support, and we also hired a social worker to support our team. And finally, on biodiversity conservation, tracking corals, mangroves, and wildlife through camera traps and other research studies make us understand how to better protect the more than 900 species we have and the ecosystems on the peninsula, how to engage guests in unique and meaningful experiences through what we call the Papagayo legacy experiences, and secure funding for research and restoration. So these are just some examples of which, of how data can lead to actual impact. And before I close, I wanted to share some lessons learned throughout the journey. First of all, if possible, hire local or regional support. It will save some traveling costs. It will also avoid language barriers, which sometimes we had to, fight with. And this local consultants can have some regional understanding of the regulations affecting you and impacting you. So for example, in our case, our local consultant was the one who suggested to implement the energy efficiency certification, which led to this 600,000 savings. So that was very useful, of course. Second, define responsibilities, clear responsibilities from day one. Include that in the job descriptions and in the governance structure. And if possible, link leadership compensation to sustainability performance. That is really important if you want to secure, commitment. Make it easy or as easy as possible to report the data with simple or simplified systems. Avoid too many steps. Of course, you will find some resistance to change along the way. So another advice, it's not about sustainability, but I will say about people management, bring cookies or sweets to the training sessions. Really, it worked great for us. Happy Belly reduces resistance to change. We did that last week and it worked. So proven. Ensure consistent tone from the top. You have to have leadership on board, otherwise it is impossible to change the culture in the organizations, and don't overcomplicate. And I think that's the most important message today. Too much data wastes time, resources, and energy of our teams. So it's important to understand that what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed, but we have to measure only what we can actually manage, otherwise we get lost. Through all this, we learn something simple but powerful. Measuring only matters if it leads to actual change, to actual action. Measurement is not the destination, impact is. And when we measure what truly matters and we drive actions, then everyone wins. And that is the true value of measurement for us. This is all I wanted to share today, but I have a short commercial. I'm happy to share that yesterday, while I was here, we were notified that we have been shortlisted for the World Sustainable Travel and Hospitality Awards in 2 categories. So if you like what we do and you can get to know Peninsula Papagayo better through our website, we'll be honored if you can vote for us. All the teams working in the back of the house for that will be super happy. Thank you so much.
Okay, so hello everyone. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to GSTC for inviting me to speak on a topic that I think is really a true foundational to everything we do in sustainability. And so I'm the Global Impact and Sustainability Analytics for Rosewood Hotel Group. So basically for the past 3 years, with my time with the company, my role really is to develop a system to track our impact program progress. So today I'm really here, very excited to share with you our journey in measurement and evaluation. So Rosewood Hotel Group, for those that you haven't really heard about this before, we are a privately owned hotel management company headquartered in Hong Kong. And we do have global office based in Amsterdam, in the US, and also in Shanghai at the moment. So as you can see from the screen, we do have 4 brands. So Rosewood Hotel and Resorts is our ultra luxury hotel segment. And then for our New World Hotel and Resorts, it's our upper scale, which is more really targeted at business customers. And Carlisle & Co. is our private members club. And lastly, for Asaya is our integrated wellness concept that's currently running in the Rosewood hotels. Yep, so a bit more about us. So currently we do have 50 hotels scattered around 26 countries. And Rosewood Impacts is our impact and sustainability roadmap, strategic roadmap that we built in around 3 years ago. So it's really a roadmap that we want to create positive impact towards our community and the planet. And underneath we have 2 pillars. So Rosewood Empowers is our community pillar, which we want to enable equal access to opportunity. And Rosewood Sustains is our circular hospitality pillar, where we want to bring circular into the heart of our operations. And thanks to our hotels, their efforts, so recently we have achieved the GSTC multi-site certification. So I would say this process really stressed the importance of measurement and evaluation. So just take a trip back to 3 years ago when I was in this role. And soon after we have launched Rosewood Impacts internally, after we have defined our community and the planet strategic pillars, we then get on the measurement journey, really. So we basically establish what our strategy is, what our priority is, and then we identify the type of data that we need in order to really fit in the Rosewood Impacts vision. So let's say 3 years ago, 2022, we established the roadmap. In 2023, we called it as our baseline year. And so the third step, start to collect data. And I would say the tip here really is to start simple at the beginning and build and gradually build up your database. So remember, it's the first time ever that your hotels have received this request. And I would say they will automatically be freaked out about this request. And the first step, another tip, is really to look at, for us to look at the GSTC standard and look at what the minimum data required, and it can be your starting point. Yep, and then you will need to you will need to choose your platform. So no matter it's starting from an Excel spreadsheet or you choose a data management platform, I would say the tool is really just a mean to an end. So what is the key is really about solid training, how you give them toolkit, and I would say step-by-step guide is the key. I also understand for the first year, I've received a lot of questions. And one thing about data is really to be patient. It will get easier as it goes on. You will get less questions as you go on. But having your measurement in place is also a way to help you clarify things. So it's part of the evaluation where when the question comes in, you will know what you are not doing well, what's not clear enough for the data owners, and then you can, again, evaluate the process and then refine your data collection methods. So why it matters? So for me, here are 4 key reasons. So again, it will help you to clear up what's your baseline performance. And you identify the strengths and weaknesses for each hotels and able to help you make smarter informed decisions. And after you look into the data, you will be able to identify the areas of improvement. So how you can allocate resources more efficiently. So in our case, after our baseline year, we are able to identify some really superstar hotels. But then you will also find some hotels don't really care about it. But then both of them are very important. So in our case, the superstar hotels, we are able to really establish some of the more ambitious programs and test it there, whether it works for a hotel, and then whether we can cascade that into the rest of the hotels. But then for the others that are not really moving in the measurement space, you need to Teams message them and bombard them and basically remind you that you need to collect data. But I would say this is really the way that you can make sure you can reach your baseline data. And then thirdly, I would say having data definitely will keep us accountable. When someone come to you, ask you about your progress, it's the data that helps you to measure your progress against our target. And lastly, of course, data helps you to document really your recognition and your achievement. So it's really the first step towards having more recognition, global recognitions, and eventually your certification. Of course, there are challenges, not as smooth sailing, as Susana also mentioned. So the fact that we are operating in 26 countries, of course, there are knowledge gaps, different background, cultural backgrounds, language, even time zones. So data is also everyone's responsibility, but often we cannot really reach this request to the key stakeholders. So I'll give you an example. For example, chefs, you might think that they are just responsible for cooking. But then, also as part of the GSTC requirement and any of the sustainability baseline in the hotel, is that you will need to have a sustainable sourcing policy where you will need to collect spending data on yes, you can see yesterday a new requirement on a 25% on the F&B spending on local purchasing. But for small hotels, imagine there are only 20 full-time staff. There isn't a purchasing manager. The chef will then need to process their own invoice on the payment system. And they actually, can you imagine, they're the one who need to input the data into my data management platform. Whereas compared to another city hotel, I would say, for example, Rosewood, Hong Kong, where we have over 1,000 staff, of course, they have a big purchasing team, right? A thorough approval process. So how do you really need cascade this information to the key stakeholders, key data owner, is also another challenge. And then lastly, of course, not everyone understands what sustainability is. Imagine my hotel in Laos. Okay, so have they even heard about sustainability before? I would say no. So part of this data process is also to have a very basic training. So we also launched some internal training on sustainability. Basic sustainability 101, what is energy, what is data? This is also the key for them to understand why data is so important. Let me look at my time. Time's up already. Okay. Okay, I'll be quick, sorry. So, yeah, I'll be quick. So I would say there are 4 really tips help me to make my journey smoother. So first of all is to tie the management bonus and incentive, not just on sustainability targets, but also on data management, data reporting. So I would say this will be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, make sure that everyone is in the loop. So secondly, we also have quarterly performance presentation that highlights regional results in the presentation. So I'd say at a friendly competition amongst the region, it would definitely help because the regional VPs, the regional leads can also push a bit. And of course, we also do semi-annual reporting to every single hotel so that they know what they are missing, so that by the end of the year, we will have a better data set. And of course, every hotel is unique. Appoint a coordinator champion is definitely the key. So we have 50 hotels, but how many full-time sustainability headcounts do we have? Actually, not even 1/3. So you do need a coordinator or champion. And lastly, a very simple and effective data management program because since day one, everyone is comfortable with we need to make sure they're comfortable with their data collection process and gradually add a bit more. So you cannot be greedy on your first year. So for example, year one, you can collect your energy usage. Year two, you collect the cost data. And then lastly, maybe from year three onwards, you can get a bit more data on the initiative. Okay, on the last slide, sorry about that. Yeah, so a summary on what I've just been mentioning is that looking at the diagram from the left to right. So first of all, measurement, of course, will hold us accountable. It's a foundational to all the sustainability commitments where we measure through our monthly data collection that aligns with our sustainability goals. And then you will get informed decision on which global programs is actually working and which are not. And then eventually you can evaluate the success of Rosewood impacts our vision. And looking from the left to right is our timeline of implementation that I mentioned at the beginning. So yeah, we'll skip this part. And then just lastly, again, one tip, you will, as a baseline, as a first step, definitely identify what types of data you need. Maybe use a tool like the GSTC Standards to begin with, and it will definitely help you to make more better informed decisions. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. That was awesome. That was a lot of really interesting perspective. So just to remind everybody, if you haven't posted your question on Slido, please do so. So the way I typically like to do this for the next 25 minutes is I would try to answer everybody's submission on Slido, but in kind of a condensed way, in a context of that can be relevant for every speakers. So I think what Jessica mentioned about accountability was a great starting point, because appointing data owner, and because I think a lot of time this analytic projects or research project could be very easily to be kind of hitting the back, and there'll be all these fancy charts and a fancy diagram created, but what do we do with it, right? So accountability, I think, is something I like to start with. And there's a few questions here that talk about how do you get the businesses or stakeholder to really contribute their part of the data to complete your project or your study or your initiatives. So I'd like maybe every speaker to sort of explain from your perspective, how do you, get the stakeholder to own their data and to contribute in your respective works. Yeah. Anyone want to start? Yeah. Sure. Since you have the mic.
Work?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think we talked about it already. It's complex. Sometimes it's challenging because some people, it's engaged naturally. Others just don't care or see this as a burden. Even more those who have, a huge workload that, for example, the chefs. In our case, they also have to submit data on food waste. They are the responsibles to lead with our artificial intelligence scales. So for us, as I said, it's important to make sure that they know they are the responsibles. We are changing and adapting all the positions, descriptions, so they actually know this is part of their daily obligations they have to comply with. Also, as I said, the tone from the top is important, and now what we have done is implementing monthly checks. So each coordinator, sustainability coordinator at the hotels, has to send us a monthly check saying, yes, we have submitted the information, we have taken part in the volunteering. So we have some checks they have to comply with, and if they fail to do that, then we talk to their supervisors, what's going on, why you're not submitting the information. But this has to be mandatory, not voluntarily, otherwise it is impossible. And also telling people why it is important that you submit this information, what are we doing with this information, and how can you benefit from this information. So saying sustainability is here to support. If you, for example, in engineering are asking for funding for, an irrigation improvement system, we can also support having the data to calculate the water footprint and justify that also from a sustainability point of view, given that we have goals in this regard. So I think these are some of the ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
As far as Destination Canada goes, obviously, yes, accountability is something very important, and that's why the decision was made to put the sustainability, the environmental aspect with the supply chain group, the procurement group, because that is sort of where all the business starts, where it begins. And so we're implementing sustainability at the inception of an agreement with suppliers and holding them accountable as well to Destination Canada in the way that we want to do business. So we capture information on all of our suppliers, such as if they have any third-party certifications, whether they are a marginalized group, and we capture all that and store all that information so we can actually report on the diversity of our suppliers, because we want this, the suppliers of Destination Canada to be representative of actually the citizens and visitors of Canada as well too. So we see huge value in that. So the accountability is not just with Destination Canada, but we pass that along to all of our suppliers as well, so they can understand what they're getting into when they partner with Destination Canada is not just a wish, but an expectation that they live up to our sustainability needs as well.
So maybe just two quick examples, because it always depends on context. I want to give one example from a really complex situation, and in some ways the best example I've ever seen on data governance, accountability, etc. So that's Hong Kong Airport, and we just talked about Hong Kong, but Hong Kong Airport Corporation is one thing. The whole area, if you've ever been for Hong Kong, has 100 businesses. So it's actually really complex. There's hotels, there's catering, there's engineering, etc. And so I evaluated them for some Global Tourism Award. So I was given the tour, and it was absolutely amazing, because the airport itself has created a system for all the 100 businesses, a spreadsheet that everyone could use, bit of training, a structure. They had competitions, incentives, they had staff days, they had sort of bringing up ideas, Green Monday and whatnot. It was just really a holistic effort at pushing sustainability, making it exciting, and getting the data. So that was fantastic. And the other example, really briefly, is the opposite of that is a one sort of person operation. This is my mum, who is 80 years old, has no technical bone in her body. And so she got her roof covered in solar panels. And now she got an app on her phone, which in itself is like, she hates phones. And she is proud every day when I'm there. She shows me on her app how many kilowatt hours she's generating, how many she's got in her battery. And to me, that's a revolution. So for her, this has become a real fun thing, and now she owns it. So two opposite sides of the spectrum.
That's amazing. Jessica, you have anything more to add?
I guess just summarize what have just been mentioned. I would say at the beginning, start transparency. So not only just about the data procedures. So in our case, we had a town hall where we launched the Rosewood Impacts Vision, so that everyone knows this is a company priority. And then, of course, as I mentioned, incentives, progress through answering their tedious questions. Really tell them that I have the patience to really guide you to go through all the difficulties. I think it's really, really the key for having a meaningful data
So does in your company people get paid more? They get a bonus if they actually report their data?
Yeah, so I mean, currently our the MD's incentive in each of our hotel is tied to a complete data reporting in a monthly basis. So of course, for me, I would then need to have a very big Excel on analyzing for each month how many % they have received, and ultimately, yes, it does impact their bonus by the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah. Well, people do what they get paid for, right? Or maybe better if they don't complete the data, they start to lose their salary. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that would really get people scared. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to kind of a very popular topic now on Slido. And it's sort of related to what Susana was saying about her mom. It's kind of very insightful, because the next question I want to ask is, and also in the context of the Pacific Islands, right? Because I know there's a lot in the audience. Obviously, in some remote location, like potentially like Fiji or some other, Micronesia islands or these small islands, there's obviously a lack of resources and or a technical infrastructure, so to speak, or even talents. There's just sort of a lack of capacity, I suppose, to build a holistic data management strategy. So I wonder if you guys have any examples of, and really it could be, of course, not just in the context of small islands in the Pacific, but also in any organization that are small by nature and may have limited resources. And probably some of you all started with limited resource in your practice as well. So any one of you would like to share some advice or feedbacks, especially in context of the Pacific Islands, for the audience here. Yeah.
I just want to refer to an example I heard yesterday from Nukobati Island resort here in Fiji, where the lady challenged, you've got formal standards, data and data management systems and all of that, but then you have local knowledge. And you've got the local people, and so how can you reconcile? And I think sometimes, energy, water, in some ways you pay the bills, you can convert that hopefully into some numbers, but actually asking the people on the ground, how are we doing? We must not forget that could be the ultimate finger in the air. So it doesn't have to be super scientific, but collectively, I think we need to look much more into the citizens' sort of verification, if you want. So I really liked that yesterday.
I think I can share a bit more as well. And of course, we do have hotels in smaller islands like Little Dix Bay, not specifically in the Pacific. But I think sustainability is very holistic. We are not just looking at numbers, but at the same time, when we measure impacts, you're also looking at the qualitative side. Given an example like Little Dix Bay, they don't even have a thorough recycling system. How can I get the waste data? But then you can look at the social side where they really have the strength, right? And where you are really want to focus for your vision. So as I also mentioned in my presentation, you will need to look at your vision. Maybe environmental is not your strength, but then you can look at social, you can look at biodiversity, and maybe you can contribute a bit more in that area, and then you can start simple in the environmental terms. For example, energy, water, waste data, you can start in a step-by-step approach, but at the same time, don't let go of the other things that you are doing amazingly. Yeah.
Actually, Susana, I think one key advice you mentioned in your presentation just now is just manage what you can, measure what you can manage, right? So really pick the most important aspect of it. So I think that cash could be pretty relevant to some of the smaller companies or community. Just, you don't need to build a fancy dashboard, but just start with something you can actually manage. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that in your experience for picking what you can manage. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, in 2024, when we have to, start measuring, it was just myself in the team. Now we are like 10 people. So I had to do everything from measuring to training the staff on turtle nesting protocols. So as you can imagine, I couldn't spend most of my day just measuring data for the sake of that. I mean, what is our goal? What are our biggest impacts? If you are like a really hotel in a small island or a small location, look at your business and what do you want to reduce? What is your largest impact? For example, it's not the Pacific, but I was not long ago in Chile and Patagonia, and I was talking to some hotels there, and they wanted to start, recycling. They don't have, a management system for that. They are not recycling, and I was telling them, well, you just have to start measuring how much waste you're generating, work with other hotels in the area because you are located in a really remote region. So also the same for here, and then work together to get the data and make decisions which benefit all the region, not only you, because I mean you are like a really small hotel, maybe you don't have a capacity to negotiate with the waste management vendor, but maybe if you join forces with other hotels with your small, capacity, you will be able to reach like bigger milestones. So that will be the recommendation. Yes, focus on what is truly important for your business and the impacts you're having, and if possible, join forces with other small organizations in the area.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I see this question, which I think could be relevant for quiz, because there's a few other questions related to your wellness index, which I think people are quite interested. But specifically, though, because community and culture aspect of measurement is also, two topics that are less talked about. I think environmental, even the kind of the economic impact are very often talked about, right? But how do you build that into your wellness index in terms of community and culture as well? Can you talk more about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Culture and community involvement, as you said, they are some of the more challenging things to measure, less sort of quantifiable results, and that's where Destination Canada partners with other organizations, in particular an organization that we do a lot of work with, Stats Canada, that have sort of data provided to them. There are quite a number of metrics. If you go into the Wealth and Wellbeing Index, you can actually see the individual metrics that are captured and measured and reported on, and what we are finding is certainly, as I mentioned, the vastness and the differences of all of our provinces and territories is that seems to be the area that a lot of people are concentrating on. They look at it as their opportunity, and they're really seeing the benefit of recognizing the culture that is, whether it's in Quebec with the French cultures, whether it is in our territories with a lot more Indigenous cultures, that really we are seeing a huge benefit in sharing that information around. So the information, the metrics themselves, Destination Canada works with independent companies that gather that information, then we amalgamate everything into our Canadian Tourism Data Collective, which is where the Wealth and Wellbeing is included, and that's where we ultimately report on it. So it is a challenging aspect to gather the data that represents cultural diversity and improvements in community, but it's probably some of the areas that we're seeing the best positive impacts from.
So I just see two questions there, and sort of coming to your second. So I want to combine the one on biodiversity and culture, just because I've got a little interesting story from New Zealand. I worked in the Department of Conservation, and we had a project on regenerative tourism. And so we worked with the local Maori group of the iwi. And so we asked, what would success look like for you? And the answer was, well, we want to eat the takahe again. And then, like, the takahe is an almost extinct bird in New Zealand. It's flightless. And so, like, okay, that's an interesting measure. Okay, but of course then the takahe used to be eaten. It's a bit like the turtles in the Great Barrier Reef. It's a contentious cultural issue. What they meant to say is, when the biodiversity is so thriving again, that we have so many takahes running around, we can actually harvest them traditionally again. And that would be basically the reassurance that we have re-established the natural environment the way it should be. And so after coming to terms with that, I realized that's actually a really good measure for the integrity of the ecosystem. And so the reason I mention that is, I guess it really depends on the local context, on what's important to the local people in maybe different cultural groups. And often biodiversity and culture and practices are obviously interwoven. So I think I learned a lot from that example. I think standardizing some of those measures is difficult. That's why we often talk about energy, water, because it's easy, right? It's the same unit, it's a physical unit. Some of these things differ for different places.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you brought up context, because very often, right, from biodiversity, this is a topic where maybe a hotel or a tour operator that are not operating by the very obvious biodiversity attraction, they will just sort of automatically check it off. Like, okay, that's not so relevant for me, right? But in fact, maybe let's think harder about it. So I like maybe to pick Jessica's brain on, because Rosewood obviously operate some in the remote islands and very exclusive destination, but some just in the urban cities, right? So how do you, as a group, measure biodiversity or, put that in context of your impact program?
I would say in these two ways, especially in the hotel industry, storytelling is very important, because often you want to communicate these impacts with your guest. So I would say for us, in these two aspects, as we do mention, measuring in these two aspects is very difficult, but then we will usually do our best in storytelling and making sure when they travel here, they respect the culture, they respect the biodiversity when they visit the hotels. This can be through any verbal communications from the guest experience, or any communication we can give to the guests when they check in. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we have a few more minutes left. I like to try to digest a lot of the questions. So there's a few questions sort of about like AIs and technology, and there's a few questions about how do you influence behavioral change. So I like to kind of combine the two, actually, because I think leveraging technology and driving behavioral change could be one question. So I like maybe all of you to give your perspective on what sort of cutting edge technology you're using today, and especially how do you use that not just to collect data but to drive behavioral change. Maybe starting from Susana, maybe could you give maybe some examples, some insights of your works in this area?
Okay, thank you. So we're using this smart scale. We had a provider. We decided to test to be, the hotel testing or piloting that within the Four Seasons corporate. So this is a scale which actually is placed in the employee cafeteria and also in the main kitchen. So in the main kitchen, whenever the chefs prepare something and they put that in the bin, it takes a picture, it weighs, and it gives us data on how much grams of food waste is generated per dish, per preparation, per cover, per day. So with that, and together with the info coming from the cafeteria, because whenever you're having lunch at one of our hotels, if you're an employee, then when you finish that, you put that into the bin, and the bin tells you how many grams you are, producing of food waste. So, and you also see the information of your colleagues. So it, inspires people to reduce the food waste consumption. And we have actual and daily data of the food waste which is generated. So that has, sparkled action within our teams and the chefs to reduce the amount of food waste generated in preparation. For example, in the breakfast buffet, we have a breakfast buffet, which is the main generator of food waste. And now we know how much gallo pinto, which is the typical food in Costa Rica, we have to prepare per guest prior to arrival. So this gives us, important information to make decision for planning, buying produce. So this is the way we're using that. We have also now established or set up a software as a service, an online software as a service to upload all the information on sustainability, which also provides metrics, it provides, stats, and we're also, able to share that with our owners in real time, which actually is amazing because they don't have to email me whenever they want something. They can just Google, log in and check the info. So yeah, like we are using that, and we are moving forward to assessing other options in the future.
Maybe I just briefly because we're working on a big initiative in Australia around AI and tourism, where we haven't started because we're trying to get the funding from the government, but in the process we had to look at what's actually out there. And so there's tools like Booking.com, Airbnb, where really AI is used to effectively tailor itineraries, and that's of real interest to destinations, of course, especially in Australia, where we try to get tourists into the more regional off the beaten track. So how can you, with real-time information, get the right tourists to the right places? Now, what I'm saying is that in the moment, those tools are not necessarily driven by sustainability parameters in the algorithms. And I think it was mentioned yesterday, Booking.com. I mean, Travelers has tried for a while to sort of rate the greenness of hotels, but that's not the ones that are listed on the top. The ones on the top are maybe the ones that pay the highest commission. So this is a problem, because same with itineraries, we could route people, we could identify in this audience who's interested in what type of activity, and then route you to that maybe village tour, etc. But that's not how the algorithms are designed. And I think that's where, I guess, because maybe it's always who pays designs the algorithm. So where's the sustainability coming as a key driver of that decision-making, low-carbon itinerary? So I think huge potential, but we need to harness it for sustainability as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we are coming to the end. So I would just probably summarize this. I think as much as we talk about data and all the actions, I think human consciousness about all this issue is still the key, right? So as long as we're aware, we're educated, and we're empowered, we could make the right decision and we could input the right data. So I want to thank you, everybody, for a wonderful panel and discussion and everybody's question. I believe the coffee break is starting, so thank you again for today.